I know we're about 10 minutes behind, but that's fine. Thank you for bearing with us. So today we're doing a kind of roundtable discussion on what's next. A lot of over the last couple of months, we've been really inundated with a lot of negative news and seeing a lot of just lives impacted by this COVID-19 virus, and it's been very disheartening. And we wanted to take a moment today to kind of really reframe the conversation and think a lot about what comes next after COVID-19. A lot of what we see in the news isn't really documenting how are we going to, live life again once we all get out of our stay-at-home orders. What's life going to look like? We just kind of wanted to challenge that notion and really think long and hard about how are we going to build community after this is done. And we'll take the first couple minutes just for each of our panelists to introduce themselves, say their name, their organization, and pronouns. And I also, just to kind of open up the space to a space of joy, have each of the panelists name one thing that brings you joy or pleasure during this time, and then we'll move into the rest of the conversation. So Jen, do you want to start?
Sure, thanks, David. Hi, everyone. My name's Jen Jenkins. I work as a public policy advocate at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, but I'm not here in that official capacity. My pronouns are they, them, and what keeps me happy right now during this time and forever are my plants. Thanks.
Jason?
Hi, friends. Jason Leiden. I am serving currently as the settled minister at the Second Unitarian Church here in Chicago. Formerly founder and national director of Black and Pink. Excited to be with you all and look at the beautiful faces of these amazing panelists and humbled to be among you. And also just noticing all of you who are partaking as participants and just feeling grateful. And things giving me joy during this crisis are my cats and my dog, maybe a little bit, but more so my cats, snuggling and seeing their cuteness way more often.
Perfect. Thank you. Dominique?
Hi, everyone. My name is Dominique Morgan. I am the current executive director of Black and Pink. I am just super hyped to be here. And I just want to take a second to shout out David, our deputy executive director, for this idea, for pushing it forward, for being the steward of this. It's just incredible that we are leaning into creating these sort of spaces as an agency. So I'm thankful for David for doing that heavy lifting. What brings me joy? Honestly, throwing things away lately has been bringing me joy. I've had such a struggle for a decade of just keeping things and not knowing why. Over the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks that we've been navigating this, getting things out and creating space and finding new space for other things or falling back in love with things that I hadn't seen in forever has been really exciting for me.
Perfect. And thank you, Dom. And yeah, thank you for that shout out. And last but definitely not least, serving that red lip is Jasmine. Jasmine, you want to go ahead?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Jasmine Tasaki from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm the executive director of We Care Tennessee. I am also a fellow at Black and Pink, and I love my work I do with Black and Pink. Shout out to y'all for always putting together amazing events. And we know this is much needed in this pandemic. We still need to have conversations and do the work we do. So hats off to you all for doing this virtual roundtable today. What brings me joy? I think right now, family and cooking brings me joy.
Snaps to that. Well,
yeah, have time to actually do it.
Great. So yeah, we have a great panel lined up for y'all today. And so a lot of my moderating today is informed by one of our incarcerated members, Patricia Tremble. Patricia is incarcerated in Missouri right now, and we've been in contact with Patricia just to kind of get an idea of what does the state of incarceration look like? How do we move forward as an organization? How do we, not even only as an organization, but how do we move forward in our own work as we navigate COVID-19? And also just how do we re-envision the community that we're building, and how do we think about community in a way where we're actually looking out for each other? And so Black and Pink, if y'all don't know, and a lot of other orgs, we're fighting for our incarcerated folks to just receive basic healthcare and basic well-being practices, so we don't have that COVID outbreak inside. And we know that that's failing. We know across the country that there's been a lot of COVID outbreaks on the inside. We know that there's been a lot of deaths on the inside. Patricia reports that they're not even receiving basic instructions on how to wash their hands and how to, safely social distance outside of solitary confinement, which we know is also just a terrible practice in of itself. And so most facilities are not even also releasing their crisis management plans. So we'll take the next couple minutes just to talk with the panelists about what the current landscape of COVID-19 is on the inside, which facilities have outbreaks, what are the health conditions, what's the impact on our community on the inside, and then what efforts are being made to champion the dignity of currently incarcerated folks, what bailout efforts look like, how are people organizing for release, just painting a really general landscape of what COVID-19 and incarceration looks like. So just anybody, popcorn out.
I'll quickly just say that from the perspective of doing the logistics of getting support inside to folks and hearing those real-time needs that people have, it's scary the level of erasure that is taking place for currently incarcerated people during this pandemic. It's frightening that people aren't comprehending that we all are going to have to get on the other side of this with a plan of how we can access health resources and so on and so forth for us really to flatten a curve in the community. And the fear that folks inside have and no one near them is doing the work to try to hold space for them, right? The COs, the caseworkers, all of these folks are being so dismissive, and it's, you can hear it in their voice. You can hear it you can see it in the emails. And so I think right now on the inside, it's complete chaos and fear. And what I know to be true, when you're on the yard, anybody who's been inside, when you wake up on that day and you can feel something is about to happen that day. You can know it when you wake up, and just a little bit of fire may have to hit the gasoline to spark it. This also is creating just this whole lake of gasoline where folks are just on 10. So the smallest thing is going to cause situations where folks are going to experience harm, and additional charges and all these other things. So there's just this perfect storm of fear and confusion happening right now. And we're doing our best to send in information. We're doing our best to send in resources. But at the end of the day, the only answer is to get them out of there. We can only do so much from out here, sending, lifeboats inside. This virus has proven what many of us already know, that these systems have to go away for us to have a equitable lived experience as a country, as a world. And we at Black and Pink are doing our best, but the honest truth is that we're doing the bare minimum. The best is really getting these folks out of there, and we're more dedicated than ever to that work. But it's the fear that I sit with, that I hear every day, that keeps me up at night.
Go for it, Jasmine.
Okay, I was just gonna say, I think here locally where I am, for me, the most shocking part is just how the information is not getting into the jails, but how they're letting some people out. And I don't understand how you can decide that some people need to be let out and others do not, especially when we have about a 72% or 76%, I was trying to find it, of the tests that they gave out, of the 266 tests that they gave out in just one of our criminal justice centers, 76% of those tested positive. And I just don't understand how 76% can test positive. That means the officers are not, they're not communicating the safety precautions. And not only are they not communicating the safety precautions, they are endangering others going and being in proximity with people that test positive and then coming home. And if they are not, and they are quarantining, what is that saying about what they're doing for the inmates who are testing positive? And I just know that solitary confinement, from personal experience, is one of the hardest things in life. Like being in somewhere alone while you're incarcerated, especially with the culture of how the officers will take care of you as far as like even personal hygiene is concerned. In solitary confinement, personal hygiene is not something that they care about, right? So now in this pandemic, that's like even worse, because I know that there's no way for a person to properly quarantine if they're not taking care of their hygiene. So if they are sick, it's no way for them to get better. So yet again, it's just another dead end. So it's the same shit we're used to, like Dominique said, when it comes to these systems.
Thank you so much. Y'all are appreciating your brilliance. Well, I remember so clearly washing like boxers in the sink when there's 3 other people in the same cell, and there's no way we could possibly physically distance from each other, and yet we're trying to make the best possible choices to keep each other as safe as possible, even if we don't like each other. I can remember that just so well. And thinking about the stories that I'm hearing from folks on the inside about how people are trying to figure that out as best as they can, even with the disasters. And I really appreciate what you were saying, Dominique, about getting people out, because when we look at the rest of the world and we compare us, for always, the United States is the largest incarcerator in the world. And then very specifically, looking at what's happening now, where Turkey released 40% of their incarcerated population, Iran released 20% of their incarcerated population. If we were to be on par with Turkey, we'd have to release 880,000 prisoners to get them out and to reduce the risk of exposure inside. And we don't in the US have the mass movement to make that happen. And that's on us. As much as it's on our system for being a white supremacist, horrific system, it too is on us as a movement to need to grow in our strength to demand and force our people to get free. And I really appreciated what Ruthie Wilson Gilmore was saying, gosh, it was a couple weeks ago when she did her talk with Haymarket, and she was saying how just getting people out, just decarcerating people isn't abolition, right? If we just get people out and just let them go without all the resources, that's not abolition. Abolition is about more, is creating the alternatives, making sure everything is happening. And yet, I would say, I think one of the areas that I need something to, in addition to that, is to acknowledge that decarceration is abolitionist, right? It might not be the full dream of abolition and what we're trying to create, but fighting to get our people free is an abolitionist goal to dismantle and harm back this system that is taking away the lives of people we love. And so I've been really thankful working with the Chicago Community Bond Fund, because here in Illinois, we are seeing, of course, like everyone else, major death inside. Cook County Jail, though, is at its lowest population now that it's been in years and years and years. Some of that's because of people who have gotten out because of COVID-19 work, but a lot of it is because the movement around ending pretrial detention is growing and strengthening around the country. And so wondering in my mind, how do we ensure that we are building power both with incarcerated folks, formerly incarcerated folks, never incarcerated folks, to win our people's freedom right now?
Thanks, everyone. I can speak to what's going on here locally, and we've really had to get together and try to organize to get our folks out of the jails and prisons here. We encountered a lot of, and when I say we're calling ourselves a reentry hui or group that's focused on making sure that when people do get out, that we're trying to see if we can provide them with, connect them to services, because you can't just release people and then you don't want to give them nowhere to go. We want to take care of our people. And so we've had people get released. The ACLU and the Public Defender's Office here coordinated like a lot of appeals to the court. And then our hui also provided advocacy to get about 830 folks released from the jails here, because across the board the jails are overcrowded. What we're looking at right now too is a lot of the incarcerated folks are sent to a mainland prison in Arizona, and we're hearing a lot of just a lot of bad things about the conditions going on there. So our advocacy is shifting in that direction too. So it really does take a collaborative effort and a group working together. And so I'm just really happy to be here to actually be able to participate in this and to kind of hear what's going on across the continent.
Great, thank you all, everyone. So yeah, that kind of like, I think a lot of the common themes I hear is there's a sense of lack, there's a sense of deficit, like we're erasing people's stories or erasing people's value, even though that value is inherent and everybody has it and you can't ever lose it. There's a sense of white supremacy that's coming in and just, you know, taking away or attempting to take away that dignity. There's a lack of information on the inside. There's this idea of deserving, that some people deserve to be inside, which we all know is not the case. We don't understand everybody is, oh, and look, we're live streaming on Facebook. So there we go, people. And there's also this lack of communication, this lack of information. So people aren't really well informed about what's going on inside this alternative. And, you know, Jen kind of built on this too, is like taking care of people in this collaborative effort, and really working towards building this power to win freedom. And that kind of brings us to the real meat of this discussion is kind of looking at transformative justice. So how do we exist together, recognizing that we're all very complicated people? How do we unpack conflict and harm? How do we shift ideas of power so everyone can have the things they need to empower themselves? And then tying that in with incarceration, because what it really feels like right now is that pain and violence are very much a virus themselves. And not only are they spreading without corrective action, but they're pointedly, punishment is replicating this pain and violence on the inside. We have space for healing and meeting people where they're at in our communities. At home, we see this with mutual aid networks that are popping up. We see this with people who are providing meals for people who are in essential positions. We see these people every day, and when they're in our neighborhoods, we can give them a smile, we can give them a nod. When we put people in cages and they're isolated and separated from communities, we're losing their humanity, and we forget that they're worthy of respect and love. And for me, it's bringing up this idea of bargaining, where we've kind of gotten into this sort of bargaining with our social institutions, and things like the prison industrial complex, things like social safety nets. And we're told that if we concede loyalty and we give up some of our sense of power, that will be taken care of. And what we're seeing now with COVID is that's not the case. These social safety nets are falling, and basically the people who are in the minority, people that are trans, people that are queer, people that are people of color, women, people who, lack a lot of agency to make decisions of their own because of the systems that are in place. And it's teaching us that, this bargaining is involving a lot of trust and a lot of compromise. And at the end of the day, we can't trust our society and our government to, make those decisions for us. We have to stand up for ourselves, and say, let's do this different. What are our needs and how can we be met? And so I want to take just the next kind of moments, the next 15 or so minutes from y'all, just to kind of unpack, what does it look like for us, given this COVID-19, like how do we move forward as a community? What are the things that we need to do to really start holding these complicated experiences that everybody holds? How can we start envisioning the community that we see as abolitionists? How do we start making abolitionist vision come true? How do we stand stronger in solidarity?
I think one of the barriers to solidarity and one of the barriers to movement building in general is that there's the assumption that everyone has to coalesce around like one idea of thought. And if anyone falls outside of that by even a degree, then folks aren't moving in the same direction. I think it's interesting to see a movement built to dismantle systems sometimes show up as systems, sometimes show up in oppressive ways, sometimes be layered in white supremacy and all these things, right? So I think we need to really focus on grace. I think we really have to focus on those ways that we're not perfect, on the ways we don't agree, and like that love that we can hold for each other right, in spite of that, right? One of the things that I love about the language of family at Black and Pink is that it allows me to be like, you know what, today I really don't like you and I don't want to talk to you. But if anybody else says anything about you, we all about to fight. You know what I'm saying? Like, it allows us to have that space of it's not always going to be perfect, but the love is foundational. And so I think for our movement, and I think it's past movement. As a person who came to abolition reluctantly, even maybe a year after I was running this agency where there was a clique, and Jason, I think I texted Jason at like 5 o'clock in the morning one day. And I was like, yo, Jesus was an abolitionist. It was like I woke up out of my sleep and I was like, okay, this all makes sense, right? But then it's past the movement. These are my values. This is how I live my life. This is how I teach my nieces and nephews. This is how I run my home. This is how I go to the grocery store. This is how I argue with somebody. Like, these values like mold that. And grace has to be foundational in that. And I think we need to get back to that. And I don't know how we do that in a uniform fashion, but we need to have those hard conversations of what does love look like when we disagree? What does compassion look like when we are angry or when we feel like we've been attacked? And how do we focus on what we have in common when there's a very long list of what we don't have in common or what we disagree on? And that's when I think not only will we see a move in the direction that we want to see, but I also feel like that will be an opportunity for more people to come into our space, to feel like it's accessible, to feel like it's for them, compared to like the think pieces and all those things are dope. But at the end of the day, abolition is saying that everybody matters at the same level of mattering. And we need to dismantle the systems that keep folks from mattering at the same level. All it's saying is that everyone matters. And if everybody matters, then we have to do the work to let everyone see that and feel that and understand that. And I think we've been doing that, I would say, the last year for us at Black and Pink, and like even looking at language, like, yo, what are we saying? How are we saying it? Who are we, when we have these conversations, how can we break this down? How can we open it up? And as a person who's very much a newbie to these things, those are the times that I feel seen. Those are the times I feel welcomed, when it just feels very open and based in love. So I think we need to do a lot of love and grace and compassion work.
I totally agree with Dominique. And it kind of, I'm going to piggyback off there, right? So I think that right now in this pandemic, yes, all of what you said is important. But to take it a step even further, that love language that is used at Black and Pink kind of needs to be expressed throughout just the nonprofit sector in general, right? So also including our health messages, like specifically about COVID-19 right now, how we put out strategic messages to help keep our people safe, right? Because we know we're not lifted or we're not centered at a lot of those national conversations. So how do we put messages out to our people that equips them with knowledge and at the same time gives them a call to action to help keep them safe?
One of the things I would add, thank you both, appreciate you, is kind of relating to one of the things Miriam Kaba will teach us over and over again, and says so often, that we all, and this comes out of the movement in general, we all do terrible things. We all cause harm. And, you know, none of us, as this too has become so popular, none of us wants to be defined only by any single moment in our lives, either the worst thing that's ever happened to us or the worst thing we've ever done. Neither of those things are we desiring, I hope, to be defined by exclusively. But it is important, at least I think it's really important for us to wrestle with the truth that as much as people have inherent worth, as you were saying, Dominique, absolutely, we also harm each other all the time. And that level of harm varies, but we all do it. And I think one of the things our criminal legal system does is tells us that we are supposed to focus on the fact that someone else is worse than we are. And so if we punish them, that somehow means that the bad thing we've done is less bad. and that we can have some sort of personal redemption by punishing somebody else. I feel like it's a whole cultural thing we're struggling with together, to move away from punishment ideologies. And one of the things I think is amazing about this current pandemic moment is the idea of giving people cash is, I think, a very anti-punishment based way of getting through this crisis, right? The mutual aid efforts where people just say, I need money for me to take care of whatever it is I need to do. It's not a grant that then you have to write 12 pages about how you spent it and what you did with it. It is your money to take care of you, to do what you got to do with it. I think that's an inherently abolitionist practice of trusting that humans know how to take care of ourselves and spend our resources to meet our needs as best as we need them. And so I'm curious what opportunities will come out of this pandemic moment where so many people have donated, my guess is millions of dollars across the world, if not more, that are given to people just to do with as they see fit to meet their basic needs. I'm also curious too how this moment will get us to rethink capitalism, because it is part of the systems that are creating devastation, and that capitalist ways of doing healthcare are how we have such awful underlying and white supremacy, the intersection of capitalism and white supremacy are how we have these awful underlying health conditions affecting Black communities in such serious ways, leading to the disproportionate reality of death. And so how are we going to be different after all of what we're learning together? And it seems as though part of that difference is going to come through our smaller communities, work happening on smaller levels to make sure people in their communities are getting the things that they need. And that reality has been true forever.
I was just about to say
right?
that.
And that people take care of one another. And so I think more groupings of folks doing work and then creating coalitions out of those groups, right? Really strengthening grassroots seems like a huge part of the solution moving forward.
Yes, I thank you all for what you said. I hold a lot of things, just to even to add to the white supremacists and capitalism that we've been seeing. We're also dealing with colonialism, and then there's the gendered aspect of it too. I've noticed a lot of like categorizing harm. So a lot of the asks have been, we want nonviolent, quote unquote, nonviolent offenders released as opposed to violent offenders. And what does that really mean? And why do we need to categorize people in those ways? What does it even mean to be a violent offender? Was it self-defense? And when we think about state violence, and how we're as impacted people or people of color or queer trans people, the violence that we've experienced at the hands of the state. There's so much that we're trying to kind of to heal through ourselves to be able to show up in the way that Dominique was talking about, where we come from a place of love. So I think it's an amazing vision, and I want that for all of us. And I think that we need to be uncompromising in that. We can't think what will be the most politically expedient way to get to whatever our idea of transformative justice is. We need to go hard and be uncompromising, and yes, be willing to kind of work with each other in all of our differing points of view. But I really think that's an internal healing process that we can do collectively. Thanks.
One of the things that Patricia and I were talking about over the last couple of weeks was this idea that people have we have the ability to control our own behaviors, that we have a choice in this, and there's been a lot of like common threads between y'all. Dom, you started this with talking about how like everyone matters, and having access to language and accessibility. And Jason, you were talking about rethinking capitalism, and also thinking, big picture, that we all cause harm, and how we all don't want to be defined by a single moment in time. And the basic crux of all this is that a lot of these people who are incarcerated are going to come home. And so when we're thinking about like transformative justice and thinking about the future and thinking about creating space, what are some concrete steps that people can do? What are some concrete actions that people can do to start rethinking capitalism, to start making space? And what can we do on that smaller level, on that micro level, to really start building that community that we all kind of envision? What are some things that people at home can do that are even on the small level to just start being in community with one another?
I think before any of that, it's important to uplift that everybody's process around navigating capitalism is going to be different. It was really interesting for me, like when I was in that kind of in-between phase of like getting into a career, but not really having a lot of access to funds. But like being in circles of people who are doing that, the things that they would tell me that I can't do, like you shouldn't shop at Walmart, like we're divesting from Walmart. And I used to be like, well, this is where I had to go to be able to stretch the money I had to be able to get my groceries. Or even like using Amazon, right? In certain situations where I've had conversations of, there are days that I don't have the emotional strength to go in a store and get my toilet paper. And one of the things I need to do for self-care is have it delivered to my house. So I don't have an additional thing that I navigate. And I know it's different for everyone. And so I just think one of the first steps that I would like to see is that there's not a one size fits all answer about how we kind of walk away from capitalism. I think the folks who have benefited from capitalism the longest and the most are very comfortable at large sweeping divestments from it. Those who have just gotten a taste of it are just kind of like, give me a little bit more time possibly. And those who have capitalism has always, lived off of their backs and their labor and their sweat equity, they are trying to chase that. They're trying to chase that access to abundance because that's what they've been told is our purpose. So I think we're going to it's that whole conversation of not one size fits all, and grace is going to have to be there, and really talking about the why of it. I feel like in movements, often we talk about like, yes, this is happening and this is important, but like, how does it affect the experience of someone who has $1 million and someone who has $1? How do you talk to someone who has $1 in their pocket about capitalism and how it affects their life and the benefit of them like divesting from that thought process? How do you have that conversation? And if we haven't done that work to stratify everyone's lived experience and how they would engage in capitalism, we're always going to have this, this person is really about the work because they're doing X, 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 and X. And this person, they're not really about it. Did you see that they did this? Or did you see that they bought that, or what have you? So that's something that I think will help us all stay together as we navigate the how and the why of the goal of it.
I would personally love to see the uncoupling of healthcare from employment. I think that'd be a great place to start. Why aren't we just taking care of everybody because we all need healthcare? I also see the prison industrial complex and ourselves and the folks who are in there now. That's a public health issue. We should be working like a restorative justice model or a transformative justice model to not even as an alternative to the prison industrial complex. I think we can imagine beyond that. And I think that's where that collaboration comes in with people who have experienced incarceration and even people outside of it, all working together to find something that works for all of us. But I think that if we uncoupled healthcare from employment, that would be a really, really great place to start.
I think a good place to start would be, since you asked the question at home and what can just like we do, especially in this pandemic, read and educate yourself around these systems. Educate yourself around terms so that you can have an informed decision that is well informed when you're making your own opinion. And also knowing systems and knowing the oppression that has happened keeps you from replicating that while trying to navigate through systems and while trying to, educate your peers or just like still navigating through the system. It's easy to replicate these things because we've been there. And a lot of people I know down south in my area do not like especially people from a certain time, just speaking as a Black person from the South, like it's a lot of stuff that, we may not want to talk about. We may not want to relive or revisit, but just a true understanding and clarity on the systems that have oppressed us and what you want to change about them. And also that will help you know how they impact your life now and how you want it to change.
I'm really feeling what y'all are saying. I think, Dominique, one thing you were saying that really sits with me in particular is, that there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. And so we're all doing the best we can and trying to figure out how we navigate things. And I feel like for myself, I'm always trying to figure out, well, what are the commitments I'm making around my personal practice? That my personal practice isn't going to end capitalism, white supremacy, whatever. My personal actions aren't going to do that. My personal actions instead are about me grounding myself and my actions in what I think is going to be most just, most meet my needs, most meet my community needs, those that I'm like in solidarity with, and trying to figure out how we as individuals are constantly engaging in solidarity work across movements that we are not at all involved in, but want to express our care around. Like those of us, we might be focusing on prisoner solidarity and abolitionist work, but that doesn't keep us disconnected from worker solidarity, right? That there are ways that we can see how the movements intersect with each other and make our choices about how we're acting and doing things with a wide lens that allows us to care about a lot of things while focusing on that which we do. So kind of like a staying in our lane type of thing while being attentive to what's going on around us. And I feel like with your question, David, what we could, should, might do now when it comes to transformative justice, I think we can make commitments. We make commitments to things like don't call the police. And then when you're like, oh, but there's nothing else I can do, you're like, okay, I'm going to make my decision about calling the police. Why am I doing it? Who's it going to impact? So it's just thinking way more intentionally about the ways we engage these systems that we are inherently connected to, and making our personal decisions with that. But then I really appreciate what Naomi Klein's book On Fire has this great quote in it where someone said, what can I as an individual do to end climate change? And the answer is absolutely nothing. You as one individual cannot do anything to end climate change by yourself. That we as individuals join movements, we connect to organizations, that if you feel like you're doing something by yourself, find other people, connect with them, do work of learning with them side by side or virtually right now in this moment. But I think anytime we think that we can do something just by ourselves, we got to stop and figure out what's the relationship that I'm building that's getting us collectively closer to liberation and freedom.
Ooh, all of that really just hit me in my chest. I really appreciate y'all's wisdom on that. A lot of what I'm hearing is it's really interrogating yourself and sitting back and saying, here's the resources that I have, here's how I can show up in solidarity, this is what I can do. But then also turning around and being courageous and with loving kindness kind of ask, how can you meet me in the middle? What are the things that you can do? And from these panelists, what we're seeing is there's some big institutional changes, like Jen was talking about uncoupling healthcare. And everybody else was talking, and Dom was talking about, no one size fits all, that privilege has an influence here, and really checking that and thinking about what's the impact versus the intent, and how do you meet people where they're at in their life experiences. Jasmine was talking about reading and educating yourself and having a true understanding of the systems of oppression. And Jason, you did a fantastic job of talking about commitments and, being in relationship with other people and really like being willing to engage in community. And just really thinking about the ways that you can show up in a way that doesn't harm other people. And I saw that Megan had a really good question in the chat about how we can, taking it back to, the macro lens, how can we talk, can y'all talk a little bit about how we can be supportive of people in prison right now, but also, with people who recently got out and are terrified, how do they provide those supports?
Lord. Black and Pink, it was Friday afternoon, Friday 10 a.m., I think, Central Time. We put out our forms for Nebraska-based support and national support for the COVID response. In the national fund, there was $20,000. The funds were gone by Monday, right? And we know we just scratched a corner of the needs of folks. And so the ask right now is in the midst of I think one of the first things that I had to do to really challenge myself around how I engage with capitalism was really I had to address like, who am I now? Because I was living as if I was the Dominique Morgan that got out of prison in 2009. And I was like, who am I now? What do I have access to financially now? What can I do? What can I be donating to? How can I be pushing things forward with my access and power? Everyone feels like they're being impacted by COVID, because they are, but you're being impacted at different degrees. So folks need to really do some internal investigation of that, and then figure out how you can continue to financially support agencies that are taking the support directly to people, whether it's a church in your neighborhood that is getting food out there to people, or they're keeping lights on, whether it's, an agency like Black and Pink, or whether you just, I know 10 people right now, I can hand them $100. Whatever it is, really thinking about that, like that thing that Jason said, I really hope if we need to go back to the video and get that quote. The direct giving of services, of funds, is something that's radical, because most systems make you jump through so many fucking hoops to try to get $50 to get an extension on your lights. And many funders are not going to give us grant dollars to do work in that way. They want data, they want numbers, they want it to be quantifiable, they want a theory of change of why keeping a person who's living with HIV lights on, how that benefits their health. When community members who give us $1, and it's 10,000 of those people who give us $1, we can take it right to our people, and we don't have to kiss any asses. We don't have to ask any permission. And one of the most radical things that you will ever do in your life, if you have not done it, walk with one of us when we do it, is walking into a jail and getting somebody out of there and watching those COs be mad as fuck because they want to understand how this person that they thought that they buried under this punk ass bond is getting out within a couple of hours. They gag. There's nothing like that moment is everything, right? Or I've walked in with people for housing. There was a woman where this man told her she needed $500 because he didn't think she would get it. We went with the $500, and when I got there, he was like, well, actually, it's 100 more. And I had the 100 more with me. But he was trying to prevent this woman from making sure that she wouldn't get evicted. So those funds really matter right now. If it's 50 cents, I promise you it adds up, because we're trying to figure out how we dismantle systems from a macro perspective through policy and all these things. But we also need to be doing the work to liberate folks who are in that gray area of, I'm not currently incarcerated, possibly, but I don't have access to the things that I need to really stand in my strength and wield power and things of that nature. When we can break that, and it's not 6 of us, it's 600 of us having these conversations. It's 600 of us who understand how to push these systems. It's 600 of us who are wielding our power in the most efficient, effective ways. That's when this system will buckle and fall to its knees. And so, again, just think about where you are, how you can continue to support agencies that really matter and that are doing the work, and how you can partner. And if it's not through $1, how you can share the post, how you can volunteer, how you can write somebody inside and tell them that we love them and we care about them still. Those things are game changers at a time when everything feels like kind of, you know, Red October, the crisis is happening.
I think that is wonderful what you said, Dominique. I think, though, something that we need to make community-based decisions instead of a lot of personal decisions in this time. And as a person that is going to be community-based, you have to assess where you fall within the community, right? So it goes right along with what Dominique said. Where are you now, and how can you not only leverage your finances, but your power? Because with every position comes power, and every phase in your life comes power. And you need to do what's natural to you as well. So whatever power you have, wherever that power lies right now, it's good to help give that power to the community-based organizations, like Dom said, because there are a lot of grants and things that are going out, but they are time-based, right? People only have a little time to get in there because everybody is applying. So like just really putting yourself in that position. But going back to community-based decisions, we have to make decisions that impact the community, and we have to have the community tell us what type of impact they want to be made, because we have a certain amount of privilege as leaders in the community who make money, who are not, you know, in that same space we once were. And we have to step aside and really center those voices. Like, I know focus groups are like things that we're like, oh my God, but like, yeah, a focus group or talking to your girlfriend, talking to your friends to find out what needs they really have, right? And then coming up with a contingency plan. Like, let's not let our efforts fail because we don't get grants. Let's have a contingency plan in place on how we still going to make this difference. How we still going to do this? Because the need still needs to be met. So like, we can't just say, oh, we didn't get funded, we'll wait till next year. Because by next year, the problem has gotten worse. And that's just with any of the issues we're fighting against. But specifically, like right now with COVID, there's so much money that is out there, but like being intimidated by the work that it takes is not going to help us. We got to step into our leadership. We have to lean into our leadership. And I'm not just talking about people who have accepted these titles or people that have these titles or these callings, but I'm talking about the leader within all of us that are sitting at home. They don't have anything else to do. God has given you or whoever you believe in, whatever spirit you believe in, you have been given room to lead. That's why you are where you are. We all have so much time right now to dive into what can make this country better. I mean, the challenges and stuff are cute. Thank God people clean up their house. I'm down with that one. But like, we have time to really speak on issues that pour into who we are. But most importantly, after pouring into who we are, that will then be poured back into the community, right? And transformative justice is a great thing, but people have to know themselves and love themselves and know what they stand for before they can even step into the realm of transformative justice without like creating abuse and creating trauma in those spaces. Because transformative justice is only effective if people are really open to the process, right? And we know somebody will come in that's going through some shit and they will say they're open, but you know, their true intent is to cause harm. So we got to do some self-introduction, some reintroduction to ourselves. I like what Jason said earlier about people joining movements. But you know what? People join people. I say that all the time. Like, people believe in causes, but what makes a person get out there and get on the front lines or even on the middle lines is somebody that they resonated with that already fights for their cause, right? Because you can support a cause without ever lifting a finger to make a post, ever marching or any of that, right? So we have to continue to be our best selves, and we all have to consider ourselves leaders, especially in a time where we're stuck with our community. We're stuck with ourselves and the couple of people that we're allowing in our circle. So each one of us have to lead by example, right? Every time we go out. So yeah, I'm sorry, y'all, I went on a tangent, but we got to take this time to really look at what we want to stand for. So when we come back out into the world and we're around everybody, we can be a better people.
I so appreciate that. In particular, the people join a people. Really agree. So with you on that. Um, One of the things that Megan noted in their question too was that their friend had a DUI, and so one of the things I'm thinking about a lot, and we've thought about at my church and here in our community in Chicago, is that this is a time where so many of us are relying on coping skills that we thought we had given up. That this crisis, this pandemic is, I hope, helping us understand trauma and collective trauma a little bit more, because when we're experiencing this level of trauma, it is so reasonable to then rely on coping skills that are criminalized, right? Whether you want it, those are coping skills that you generally want to use or not, that they're so often criminalized, and we as people need to figure out how we are supporting one another in finding all sorts of coping mechanisms to deal with crises, so that we have lots of them instead of having to rely on ones that might be more self-destructive, right? And so figuring out how are we supporting, resourcing, nurturing, caring for each other, so that we can rely on new skills that are life-giving. And I think having an enormous amount of patience with each other, which is so hard because patience right now is particularly challenging, and yet it's exactly the thing we need so much of, like what Dominique was saying in terms of grace, right? We need to be extending the utmost amount of grace and patience possible to accept people at their most flawed selves in this moment, so that we aren't responding to that by criminalizing them more, incarcerating them, responding with state violence, but instead we're responding by offering love, compassion, care, resources. I get anxious when I'm watching, the police obviously being given so many new powers or increased power during this type of pandemic, right? We see an increase of their surveillance and increase of their powers when we're trying to create a public health response. We rely in our carceral system on the police to enforce that. Whereas instead, what would it be like if we trusted our communities with resources that they need to take care of each other, and to actually make sure we can physically distance in a way that is sustainable, and in a way that will actually keep our people safe and healthy for the long term, without relying on the criminal legal system to do that work for us.
Everything that you all said was amazing, and I completely agree. I think that mutual aid is a great way to help folks who are getting out, and I also like what Jasmine was saying on centering the voices of people who are just not getting out, or who are still in the carceral. Well, we're all in the carceral system, but who are still in prisons and jails. We just, like, for really tangible steps that we took as a group here, we got an anonymous donation and we're able to buy cell phones for people getting out. There's a mutual aid network where we put out a call for people to donate phones. There's just a lot of, I think, tangible ways to connect with other people. And I think that really is probably the clearest way to kind of work through all of the things that we need to work through. That's just through doing it together. That's all I have to add.
Great. Thank you for those great questions. So I know that we've scheduled this till 3:00 and we're a little bit behind, but we started a little late. And if panelists have just a couple more minutes to share with us, we have two really great questions in the chat. And if y'all have time, I'd love to answer those. If not, we can end it within the next couple minutes. What do y'all think?
I think we can try to answer, but I won't lie, my computer, I had another Zoom, but I'm good for, I know, maybe 10 to 20 minutes, hopefully.
Perfect. All right. So Tanya asked a really, really great question. And I'm really, really excited to hear what y'all have to say about this. So Tanya said, I appreciate the discussion of inclusion and accessibility of the movement at the early part of the roundtable. It's important to welcome people join people, as Jasmine said, and meet them where they're at, not police and shame them or us for not adhering to a single thought, as Dominique said. My question is, how do we think about when it's not helpful to work with certain people, like non-abolitionist reformers who might co-opt language of transformative restorative justice? And how do you think about making choices on with whom to spend time and energy on?
Okay, can you read the last part again? I think I got it, but I just want everybody to have clarity. So how do you make decisions on when to start there?
Spend time, like, how do you think about making choices on with whom to spend time and energy on? Especially when it's not helpful to work with certain people like non-abolitionist reformers who might co-opt language of transformative and restorative justice.
So I will take that one. I think that you have to decide within your own community because everybody's trauma looks different. And also, sometimes I don't think that it's not that you can't work with certain people, but it may be time for you to probably pass that particular assignment on to like someone else that's better equipped to deal with it before you just kind of give up. Because we know that this transformative justice is a process, right? And because if it was just like easy as 1, 2, 3, that would be how we're already navigating through the world, and we're not. So I think that you have to assess like the trauma within the person or that group or the relationship and the history. We already know working with police, I mean, from the door, that can be a bit heavy because they're the police. But if I have, I think that was, forgot where I was, but we were talking about prosecutor organizing. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of a term like that, but like just like organizing with these district attorneys and organizing with the police to try to come up with strategies, right? So, you know, I think that that kind of decides on the community because some people absolutely, if you're in California or New York, you could say fuck the police. But if you're somewhere deep south, that may be the one way in to even broadening, you know, your scale of impact or because rural areas, like people only know about the police in rural areas, right? So for you to even be able to maybe tap into their network, I don't know, but my point is it can be based on like where you're located. It can be based on the history of said people that you're working with. And then when it comes to your own community, I think that's the one spot that I would like, I won't say let the abuse go on, but like within the community, you have to understand that people will not be transformed every night. Ideologies will not be transformed overnight. And we have to work on our community, which means what? We have to work on ourselves. How we view things sometimes. I always say, like, that person that irritates you the most or that triggers you the most, there's a part of them or there's a way that they show up that reminds you of a part of yourself that you don't like or that you are triggered by. So I think that within community, like we have to learn how to pass the torch. But more importantly, that just goes to leadership development. Like even within transformative justice spaces, we need the whole community to know how to enact these practices in it because we don't want anybody like running transformative justice. It's like, oh, we have to call Sister Patterson because she's the one that knows how to do this process. No, we need for everybody to know how to enact these principles. So yeah.
Anybody else want to add?
Dominique, you're muted.
My bad. I when I saw that question, I instantly went back to like the first couple of weeks of being a sexual health educator. And I was working at a fairly qualified health center and working with young folks talking about sexual health. And I had this client where like I was stuck with this client for like a week. And my supervisor was like, yo, like you have all these classes to teach, you have this testing to do, all these things. Like you can't, like this one case can't be like your focus for 5 days. And she put me in her office and she talked about like having to trust the ecosystem. And and she was talking about like we plant the seeds, and we gotta, like, when you see somebody like out there planting, or have you seen people like build out their garden, right? There's a person that like their thing is that they just put the seed down. They don't look back. They put the seed down, they just keep going down the line, right? And somebody's coming behind them to do the other things. There's a belief that that's going to happen. And then we have these plants or whatever that come to fruition. And she was like, that's what this work looks like. And I hold that with me because I think a piece of what we struggle with when the epistemological approach to our work clashes with each other is that we feel like everybody has to go at once. We all got to go in this direction at once. When in actuality, we're at different places in our ways of knowing. We're at different moments of aha of ourselves. Some of us are in 3 years of therapy. Some of us been in for a decade. You feel what I'm saying? Like, we're at different places in the process. And it's not that we all can't go forward. It just means that we may not all go forward at the same time in the same way. And I think in this work, oftentimes we want everything to feel so tied together that we struggle with, well, if we have this thought process and we're making this movement, we don't want to feel like we're leaving someone behind. I think there's a way for us to progress and not admonish, not cast out, not push down folks who are not ready to move at the pace that we are. I think these two truths can live at the same time. And the other piece that I think about is any boundary, I respect the fuck out of any boundary made out of love. And I believe in movements, we oftentimes don't address behavior or things that will not be conducive to us collaborating or engaging in solidarity until it becomes too unbearable. We're creating these boundaries. We're pushing people away out of harm that has happened. When many times we see those red flags early on, many times. And so I think it's important to think about what boundaries we set, what goals we set, because everything is a relationship, whether it's people sitting down doing movement building, whether it's organizations collaborating, it's relationships. What's the rules of engagement in that relationship? And I think we need to be more intentional about that on the front end. And then we'll be more successful at navigating bumps in the road. But yes, I think I really want folks to think about, and I know we've thought about this, how do we go forward and not leave folks behind? How do we stay married to this vision we have while also not throwing away a person that may not see that vision as their answer right now, like the yes and of it. And it's very difficult, but it's worthwhile because I think in the end, it's beautiful to look back and say, no matter how it turned out, we did what we want. We did what was right to keep that relationship strong, and stand by our vision of what transformation can look like. Sorry, overspoke, but we all know, like, we had a whole experience with this as an agency, and I look back now when we were navigating that process, when I just wanted to be like, yo, let's burn it all down. I look back now and I'm like, I'm so glad that we did it the way we did it, because I can look back and be like, we stood by our values. We were who we said we were going to be at every turn. It was hard, it wasn't easy, but we were that. And I also have a strong prayer that after everything is over, that we can all sit down and have a conversation about how we got to that place. Because I think that's where the real transformation and restoration opportunity happens. But yeah, I think that's really important.
Thanks so much. Thanks for all of it. And I think one of the things for me around the co-optation part of that question is that the system will always try to co-opt anything and everything, right? That's what the system is designed to do. And our responsibility as the movement and many parts of movements is to keep doing our piece and doing it better anyway, right? Restorative justice, I think, is one of the things that has been severely co-opted by the state through these mandatory restorative justice court practices where they're like, oh, you can either go to jail or take part in this restorative justice practice. That's not restorative justice. When the alternative is incarceration, that's not what that was ever intended to be. And I think organizations like Generation 5, who are credited with coining the term transformative justice. And there, for folks who are unfamiliar, it's an organization of adult survivors of child sexual abuse working to bring an end to child sexual abuse without using police and prisons, and looking at the whole social structures that create the spaces where harm happens. And holding people accountable not only for harm that they've done, but also transforming the world that we live in that is making it so that people are stuck in situations where violence is constant. And one of the other pieces of the critique of restorative justice language by those who offered transformative justice language was to say you can't restore justice where there never was any in the first place. So there's a lot of different ways in which people have offered those critiques. And also, I think our conversation about co-optation gets tricky too, because while certain folks coin terms like Generation 5 around the language of transformative justice, concepts of out of the state responses to violence have existed across communities. And there are so many different ways of trying to respond. And I think when we talk about transformative justice as an option and who we're going to work with, at least for me, some of the time, part of the response is, it's okay that you're not ready, but we are moving on without you. Yes, absolutely, let's make space and accommodate and all that, but also we have a responsibility to build our power and win. That our goal is liberation and freedom, not accommodation all the time, right? Like, we're not accommodating systems of oppression. We are figuring out ways to cultivate community power to force change, because this, systems in power, right? They never give up their power willingly. So it's up to us to create enough power within communities to take it away and to refuse to capitulate. And so when we're thinking about coalitions, in my mind, it's the responsibility of each organization, each collective of people taking action together to figure out what coalitions and what teams make sense to get us closer to our goal. And if we're not clear about what our goals of liberation are, that makes coalition work impossible. We're not going to be able to work with someone if we're not clear where we're going, where they're going, where our paths connect, and where the time will come where we will fight each other because we're not on the same side anymore. But there are plenty of places where with, non-abolitionist reformers that we do align in getting people free. But we got to be clear, once we are no longer on the same side, that we aren't working on that same path, and that's okay.
I just want to piggyback I love what you said, Jason. I hate to call you Jason. I just love saying Mr. Lyden. But no, I think that it's important for us to remember, like you said, we don't want to replicate like systems of power within transformative justice and within communities, period, right? So we need to always remember, like, just to stay humble through this process, because we have all been, like you said earlier, we've all like caused harm at some point in our lives. So like remaining humble, but also like understanding that we all have power, and not saying that like, because at some point you have to understand, yes, we're creating our own power within community, and how we control that power collectively is like the only way that transformative justice will be impactful. But also honoring that even without this group, those people who that others deem not to be transformed through this process, they still have their own power, and lifting that up for them to understand that this is not saying you are not good enough. This is saying you're not respecting boundaries set by the community, and that you need to, be held accountable for that. But this does not mean you're a bad person. This does not mean we wish you are dead. We're dead. This does not mean we feel like, well, all hope is lost. You need to go to the regular. Like, no, we got to keep doing this for the betterment of the community, because people are changing every day. And we just have to stay like fluid in that way. But I love what y'all are saying.
Great. I know that we need to wrap this up because it's at 3:20 and I don't want to take any more people's time, but I also want to give Jen and Dominique a moment for any last thoughts you have before we wrap up. And then we'll just close out. You good, Dom? Jen?
I'm good.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, and thank y'all everybody for showing up and sticking with us. I know we went 20 minutes over time. And I really hope that, over the course of this roundtable, you thought that in the midst of this COVID pandemic, we've really seen our community rallying around mutual aid practices, sending care packages. My neighbor handed me some weed like a couple weeks ago, and and I had another one taught me how to make a gravity bong because I didn't have pipes. So it's like communities rallying around and teaching us how to take care of ourselves. Like we're practicing physical social distancing with Zoom calls. People are offering free self-care guides like yoga practice and meditation and other things. These are really like unapologetic acts of love and service. And right now there's uncertain times. We don't really have a roadmap for what's next. And I really hope that this last hour and a bit was, a kind of a guide and a signpost for figuring out kind of what safety looks like for us and how do we determine our needs and how do we meet them. So thank you again for taking time with us. Thank you again, panelists, for sharing your wisdom. It was wonderful to have time with y'all and engaging community. We have a survey that we're going to be putting out there that we'd like y'all to just take a moment just to, give us your thoughts on this roundtable, so that way we can try and, create another roundtable in the future and just give us some ideas of things that you'd like to do. But yes, thank you again for everybody joining us today. I much appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go too.
Thanks, all. Take good care now.